This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gidhu. It's Wednesday, June 5th. This is Africa 54. The United Nations calls for a handover of power to a civilian administration as Sudan's military earns condemnation for violence against pro-democracy protesters. An international watchdog group releases grim findings on international press freedom. And Kenya gears up to host the inaugural Africa Esports Championship in August. The United Nations is speaking out on the violence that killed at least 30 protesters in Sudan on Monday. The UN Human Rights Agency is calling on Sudan's military leaders to investigate the deaths that occurred when the Sudanese military fired on demonstrators as they tried to break up a pro-democracy sit-in. In a statement posted on Twitter Monday, Thibault Narge, the U.S. Assistant Secretary for African Affairs, strongly condemned the attack by Sudan's military junta. VOA's Latza Hoke reports on the uprising.
Protests in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, turned deadly on Monday as security forces clashed with protesters who burned tires and created barricades. The United Nations Human Rights Agency called on the military to investigate the violence and hand over power to a civilian administration.
We understand from reliable sources that between 30 and 35 people may have been killed and hundreds others injured. We also received reports that the armed forces, security forces, had entered a hospital where injured protesters were being treated, and this, of course, is entirely unacceptable.
The head of the Sudanese Transitional Military Council, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, promised that the incidents will be thoroughly investigated, but he also announced that the council has decided to cancel all the agreements it has made with protest leaders.
The military council decided the following: to cancel all the agreements and to stop negotiations with the Declaration of Freedom and Change Forces, call for general elections within 9 months, under regional and international observation, and form a caretaker government to implement the transitional mandate.
That mandate includes accountability for corruption in the ousted government and the return of displaced people to their homes. The military council and protesters had previously agreed on a longer transition period to allow time for the dismantling of Bashir's entrenched political network. Khalid Omar Youssef, leader of the umbrella group Declaration of Freedom and Change Forces, said the head of the military council is not different from Bashir.
Al-Burhan has not learned the lessons of history, it seems. He's reproducing a complete and clear image of history. We believe the matter is now in the hands of the Sudanese people.
Youssef said the attack on the protesters has united the Sudanese people in their determination to remove the military regime. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Now, the United Nations humanitarian chief is making an urgent appeal for funding to prevent wide-scale hunger in the Horn of Africa after another failed rainy season. Mark Lowcock says he will release $45 million from the UN Emergency Fund to help avert a humanitarian crisis in Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya. But he says 700 million more is needed this year to prevent another famine like in Somalia in 2011 when 250 million people died. He says of the allocated funds, 30 million is for Somalia, 10 million for Ethiopia, and 5 million is for Kenya. Lowcock talks about the threat of drought-related famine in the region.
So we're very alarmed at the food insecurity situation now in the Horn of Africa. There's been a series of failed rains. We thought that this year's what's called the GOO rain season was going to be better, at least average, maybe better than that. But we think partly as a result of the cyclones that hit Mozambique, the GOO rains have essentially failed. And what we're projecting now is really quite an alarming situation where Somalia, Ethiopia and Kenya will have a very substantial problem by the end of the year. And I'm particularly worried about Somalia, where by the end of the year we think there could be 5.4 million people in dire straits, 2.2 million of whom could be in a really acute situation. I don't think the world wants...
Lowcock says there's plenty of evidence that show how acting early to avert full-blown crisis saves lives, reduces suffering, and cuts response costs. Now, global press freedom is declining, including in countries that have long been determined to be free. Freedom House, an independent watchdog organization, reports that new forms of media repression and manipulation are spreading in traditionally open societies from Central Europe to the United States, where it cited new and very worrying attacks on media outlets by the Trump administration. VOA's Ramon Taylor has more.
Authoritarian figures who work to undermine independent journalism continue to consolidate power. But among fragile democracies, new tactics are also emerging, according to a new report on freedom and the media. The watchdog organization Freedom House says that danger lies in China's globalizing influence, including efforts to harness media across Africa.
They're doing it by exporting their message and finding friendly outlets that will publish and broadcast that message. They're doing it by putting pressure on journalists, but also diplomats and media owners in countries to censor, basically on Beijing's behalf.
According to Freedom House, the bleak outlook for global media freedom is the result of worsening records across the map, alongside the rise of right-wing populism. Classified as the two least free regions in the world, Eurasia and Middle East North Africa saw their average press freedom scores decline by 9% and 11% respectively since 2014. But also contributing to the overall global decline is Europe, where 4 out of every 5 countries are free. However, Europe's average press freedom score dropped 8%. Freedom House reports that a total of 16 nations designated as free have seen a reduction in press freedom scores during that 5-year span. Sarah Rapucci, the report's lead author, says the United States, which Freedom House labels the world's leading democratic power, maintains strong legal protections in the face of threats and attacks against individual media outlets.
The major news media have been really strong in pushing back against these attacks and in continuing to publish information that holds leaders to account. But the concern is that norms may be changing and that it will be difficult to get back to where we were before.
Live ammunition that has been going on for like almost a minute.
In troubled media environments like Sudan and Venezuela, Rapucci maintains that social media, despite its flaws, continues to play an outsized role as a lifeline to journalists and to democracy as a whole. Ramon Taylor, VOA News, New York.
Miaza Ashinafi is Ethiopia's first female Supreme Court Chief Justice. She was named to the High Court after a long career as a human rights attorney. In an interview here at VOA, our Ayen Bio asked her about the challenges ahead.
This is a huge appointment. It's the first time that Ethiopia has had a female Chief Justice. What does the appointment mean to you?
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. And at the personal level, I'm really proud of this accomplishment. But it's also a burden, because the responsibility is huge and the expectation is huge. But in a nutshell, you know, when a task is challenging and exciting at the same time, it's likely to produce a result. So I'm looking forward.
Well, I want to get a better idea of exactly what your work is. And upon your appointment, you're quoted in the media telling the Prime Minister's office that you, quote, might not be happy with the decisions that you make in this position. You told them that if they want business as usual, you're not the right person for the job. What exactly did you mean by that?
I was talking about the independence, the importance of the independence of the judiciary. If under my leadership we manage to cement the independence of the judiciary in Ethiopia, this is not going to change the history of the last 40 years. This is going to change the history of the last 3,000 years of, you know, judicial administration in Ethiopia, because there was no clear separation of power. So this time we are aspiring to establish an independent court. We are aspiring to establish a court that is co-equal with the other two branches of the government. So I was talking about that.
We spoke to Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed this week, and he spoke about judicial reform and the rule of law. He said that it needs to be applied evenly. And he says, quote, everyone should get equal treatment in the face of the law. It should never be used as a tool for revenge. As the Chief Justice, how do you make sure that that happens?
I don't think there is sufficient understanding about the importance of cementing, as I said, judicial independence. So I talk about this continuously. Secondly, talking will not be sufficient. Secondly, I need to establish systems to assure judicial independence, to prevent interference.
What type of systems?
When we appoint judges, we have to make sure that our judges are not amenable to any political agenda. Secondly, we need a code of conduct. If, judges should not involve in any political activity, and they have to make sure that they are impartial. Thirdly, we can even issue a law which says that, for example, if any executive member tries to interfere in the work of the judiciary, that could amount to contempt, court contempt, and they can be accountable. So I'm prepared to go that far.
That was Ethiopia's first female Supreme Court Chief Justice Miaza Ashenafi speaking with VOA's Ayen Bio. Be sure to join us Thursday for part 2 of their conversation about defending women's rights in Ethiopia. Now, for more on the political conflict in Sudan, journalist Jason Patinkin joins me live via phone from Khartoum. Jason, good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Good. Now, we understand the military council is offering unconditional talks to the protesters and the coalition of opposition groups. How are these groups reacting to that offer?
So far, one opposition representative has rejected that call. Otherwise, there hasn't been much public response yet. I think it'll be quite interesting to see in the next coming days what the opposition does in response, because the coalition, which is a group of labor unions and professional unions and opposition parties, has been quite fragile, with some of the more conservative groups not always going along with the decisions of the group. So it is possible that maybe we start to see a fracturing as some if some parties decide that it's to their benefit to engage in this dialogue, while others remain firm against any military rule.
Jason, we understand that the death toll from Monday's crackdown on the opposition groups has risen to more than 60, with bodies being recovered from the Nile River. What more do you know?
Well, on the bodies recovered from the Nile, it's difficult to confirm that. That came from the Sudan Doctors Committee, which is an opposition-linked group, or a group linked to the protests. And the reason it's difficult to confirm is because they said that those were bodies that were actually pulled out by the rapid support forces who carried out the massacre on Monday. So it's difficult to tell. It's difficult to go near the Nile because of heavy military presence. So it's unclear about that. However, what I can say is that there's been many anecdotal reports coming in of continued violence in various neighborhoods in Khartoum. People I've talked to say that not only are they angry at what happens on Monday, but they're also living in fear of continued attacks or targeted killings or indiscriminate killings as well.
Jason, thank you so much. We'll keep up with you there. Follow this story for us. We'll talk to you perhaps tomorrow or Friday. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jason Patinkin is a journalist based in Khartoum, talking to us live via phone from Khartoum. We'll be right back.
I am Sheikha Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
Could be French,
English,
Portuguese,
Bantu,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African Beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. Since taking office in his first term in 2015, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has said he aims to revitalize the country's agricultural sector to reduce the OPEC members' reliance on oil exports and cut down on costly food imports. Kofu Durosinmi-Eti is part of a growing number of young farmers putting down roots in the sector and taking up organic farming. Lagos's Green Festival was organized to unite the growing number of Nigerians adopting healthier lifestyles with fitness instructors, nutritionists, wellness experts, and organic farmers. Nigerians are known to be very particular about their traditional foods and ingredients. Fitness lovers, or FitFam as they're known on social media, say they aren't necessarily asking people to change their culture, but to put their health first. Next up, a social media campaign against dress codes and expectations that women wear high heels at work has gone viral in Japan, with thousands joining the #Kutu movement. Nearly 20,000 women have signed an online petition demanding the government ban companies from requiring female employees to wear high heels on the job. In decades past, businessmen were expected to wear neckties, but that's changed since the government started a Cool Biz campaign in 2005 to encourage companies to turn down air conditioners and reduce electricity use. Now, many businessmen and government officials don't wear ties at all. The petition seeks to end gender discrimination and make it easier for everyone to work, creating a working environment free from unnecessary burdens. And finally, Jay-Z is the first hip-hop artist to become a billionaire, according to Forbes.com. As well as music, the American music mogul and businessman, who is married to singer Beyoncé, has amassed his fortune in other areas too, including liquor, art, real estate, and stakes in companies like Uber, says the article. Born in 1969, Jay-Z began life in Brooklyn, New York, where he lived in the Marcy housing projects and was a drug dealer before becoming a musician, starting his own label, Rockefeller Records, to release his 1996 debut, Reasonable Doubt. And that's what's trending today.
U.S. President Donald Trump joined Queen Elizabeth Wednesday in Portsmouth to commemorate the 75th anniversary of D-Day, the start of the Allied invasion of the Normandy beaches in France that led to the defeat of the Nazis. On Tuesday, Trump and British Prime Minister Theresa May spoke to the media during a joint press conference. Here's VOA's White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara with the details.
Protesters flooded the streets of London on the second day of President Donald Trump's state visit to Britain with different messages for the U.S. leader.
Because of his climate change policies and the fact he's pulled out of the Paris Agreement.
Values like respect for other people, tolerance, non-discrimination.
My biggest problem with Trump is just the hate within him and the fact that he can bring that hatred out in other people.
Women's groups also demonstrated against what they view as the Trump administration's attacks on reproductive rights.
There seem to be fewer people compared to the more than 100,000 who protested Trump on his visit here last year. Organizers say that is because it's a weekday and blame the poor weather. Still, the commotion that they caused can be heard about a block away at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, where Trump and May had their joint press conference.
Trump dismissed the protests as fake news and said he felt only tremendous love from the British people.
Even coming over today, there were thousands of people cheering. And then I heard that there were protests. I said, where are the protests? I don't see any protests.
Aside from that issue, Trump told reporters he is committed to what he called a phenomenal bilateral trade deal.
There is tremendous potential in that trade deal. I say probably 2 and even 3 times of what we're doing right now.
Prime Minister Theresa May, who steps down as the Conservative Party leader Friday over failure to reach an agreement on Brexit, also expressed support for a bilateral trade deal.
And it is this relationship that helps to ensure there are jobs that employ people here in the UK and in the United States, that underpins our prosperity and our future.
But analysts downplay the chances of reaching a trade deal anytime soon.
With Brexit still uncertain and the inability to determine what a future US-UK trade relationship will look like without the resolution to the question of whether the UK will remain in the customs union or the single market with the European Union.
Further wading into the Brexit controversy, Trump met with pro-Brexit leader Nigel Farage, a strong critic of May. On Wednesday, Trump will continue his trip with D-Day commemoration ceremonies in both Britain and France and a stop in Ireland. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News, London.
Wednesday is United Nations Environment Day, a day for encouraging worldwide awareness and action to protect our environment. This year's theme is air pollution. The world's largest single environmental health risk is air pollution. That's according to the World Health Organization. The WHO says air pollution kills about 7 million people each year, and millions more suffer from long-term health problems such as asthma, stroke, lung cancer, and heart disease. The World Bank estimates the global economic cost of breathing dirty air at more than $5 million every year. Now, Cameroon's Anglophone conflict that has forced 500,000 people from their homes and left 1.3 million people in need of aid was named Wednesday as the world's most neglected displacement crisis by aid workers, who say the Central African country is inching towards full-blown war. The Norwegian Refugee Council, which compiles the annual ranking, says hundreds of villages have been burned, hospitals have been attacked, and nearly 800,000 children have seen their schools close. It's time for our tech segment, and joining us now is our tech reporter, Paul Ndiho. Paul.
Thank you, Esther. I'm right in your neighborhood. Kenya is gearing up to host the inaugural eSports Championships in August. In the run-up to the big event, young players are already participating in several leagues. Meanwhile, Kenyan gaming event companies are hoping to cash in and become significant players in the global arena. The global gaming industry, valued at over $135 billion, has Kenya's budding gamers sights set on honing their skills to build professional careers. The faster-growing industry continues to create opportunities on several fronts. Video gaming as a form of entertainment has grown to also become a spectator sport at a club in Nairobi. Players recently had a chance to battle it out on the Kenyan National League of the African Esports Championships.
If you look at countries like those in the West and in Asia, esports has become a full-time occupation where you have dedicated athletes who compete in games. So I can list some of them off, like League of Legends has a dedicated league, Overwatch in multiple continents, whereby the players are paid a stipend and they also earn money from endorsements that they receive from sponsors and corporate investors. And this has now changed the landscape of the sport, where people are taking it now more seriously, like an actual sport.
Gaming is big business and has given rise to tournaments that offer impressive amounts of prize money. Esport boasts of an estimated 250 million players worldwide. The International Olympic Committee recognized esports in 2017 as a sports activity. But the IOC maintains that the structure of esports and its focus on commercialization is currently hampering its immediate hopes for inclusion in the games. Sylvia Wahome, also known as Queen Arrow in the gaming circles in Kenya, is the first female professional gamer. She has signed a contract with the US-based esports Exit Wounds team.
I see myself becoming one of the most recognized esports athletes. And not just because of my gender, because of my skill. Because I'm taking the slow and gradual steps to improving my gameplay.
Esports is the competitive side of electronic gaming, with multiple players battling against each other primarily in teams and often in matches that are streamed live to crowds of young fans.
With the growth of the industry, especially at the numbers that the industry is growing, in the international market, I believe that esports will be a career option very soon.
Several African countries are positioned to benefit from gaming because of their youthful population and broadband access. Talent managers are also seizing the opportunity to nurture professional gamers.
We know there's quite a number of talented players already, and so as the sessions grow, as the competitions expand, we feel that we're going to capture quite a number of talented players that will enable Kenya to compete against the best in the world.
Global esports revenues are expected to top $1 billion in 2019. Up to 27% from last year, amid ballooning revenues from advertising, sponsorship, and media rights to competitive video gaming, according to a report from Newzoo, a gaming industry analytics firm. That's today's Tech segment. Back to you, Esther.
Hey, Paul, I mean, this is a global phenomenon, and it's catching up in East Africa and Africa as well. What more can the youth expect?
Well, it's big business. You're talking about over $1 billion here. A lot of young kids are looking forward to this because not only can you make money, but if you're really good, you can be picked up by these major competing sports events like across the world. For example, ESPN is looking into sponsoring some of these events.
Wish it happened when we were younger. But anyway, thank you, Paul. All right. Be sure to join Paul Diho each Wednesday for another tech segment on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a good evening.